This is our boy. His name is Alan Palacio, and my guy here is living the most comfortable life ever. Every day he's munching on expensive food, relaxing, even bathing with hot maids. Honestly, I feel jealous of him, but the weird part is that this guy doesn't even know where he is. Then one maid casually drops his family name Palacio, and he freezes. Just that quiet moment where everything clicks at once. He knows that name. Because Palacio isn't just any noble family, it's from a game he used to play Psychedelia. And that's when it hits him. He got dropped into the worst possible start. This world is literally destined to be destroyed by something called the 5 Great Sins. The Palacio family are among the first to be wiped out. Even worse, he's not the hero, not even a side character. He's the third son of one of the most hated noble families in the game, and his elder brothers are absolute disasters. So now all that luxury suddenly feels pointless. He lies on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and reality sinks in. What's the point of eating well and living comfortably if he's just going to die in 10 years? But then in the depths of that hopelessness, something clicks. Knowing the future itself is a power, almost like prophecy. And if he already knows the causes of destruction, then why not eliminate them before they even grow? So he makes a wild decision to reform the 5 Great Sins from the ground up, while they're still children. And 2 months later, that plan is already in motion as he sits in his study, hearing reports from his newly hired one-eyed knight Ivan about rescuing orphan children from an illegal human testing facility in the East and handing their care over to a girl named Utia. And when Ivan compliments his work, Alan responds with a stiff, unnatural grin that completely confuses him, making Ivan wonder if it was even a compliment at all. While Alan himself realizes the original owner of this body wore his emotions openly on his face, but now even something as simple as a smile takes conscious effort, like he has to manually become human again. I think my control over this body ends at the face, and standing in front of him is Ivan, one of the rare, honest, and loyal characters in the game Psychedelia, because in a world overflowing with deception, a guy like him is basically a national treasure. Which is exactly why Alan hired him immediately. But now Ivan cuts straight to the real issue, asking if everything he's doing is really to save that girl named Utia. And even after years as a mercenary, he says he can tell she wasn't normal, because he still remembers the broken test subjects in that facility. But Utia was different, calm and silent even while chained up, like some terrifying pressure was leaking out of her body. And that's what confuses him most. Why would someone like that just accept being captured? So he asks the question directly, why didn't you bring her here? There's no benefit in leaving her behind. But Alan's expression instantly turns serious. And even if he looks like he's ignoring the concern, he calmly insists that leaving her there is part of the plan, because he already knows her true identity, Utia Blutia, a non-human destined to form a contract with an otherworldly being, awakening as Wrath, one of the 5 Great Sins. The bloody queen who will one day slaughter millions. But if she grows up in peace, she may never awaken at all. And just like that, Alan believes he has defused one of the future apocalypse bombs. So he clears his throat and finally gives Ivan the real mission, telling him the time still hasn't come yet, leaving Ivan completely stunned by those cryptic words, before ordering him to keep everything secret and quietly sponsor the orphanage, then handing him a sealed letter meant for Utia, claiming it's just to comfort her after all she's been through. But in reality, Alan knows exactly what he's doing as he watches Ivan ride off toward the orphanage, because the real key inside that letter isn't comfort at all. It's a phrase he remembers from the game Psychedelia. The same chant the Archbishop once used in a desperate attempt to suppress a fully awakened wrath under a blood-red moon. Sin of wrath, calm down. Agony of the dark, impassivity of the bright, belonging with the fall. A line that always failed in the original timeline right before a doomed boss fight. But this time it's still early. She's still a child, so maybe it can actually work. And while Alan knows it sounds insane to gamble the fate of a future calamity on a game memory, he figures these non-humans are basically fanatic beings tied to otherworldly concepts anyway, so it might just be enough. Meanwhile, Ivan arrives at the orphanage and meets Utia, a small white-haired girl radiating an unnatural amount of mana despite her emotionless doll-like expression. And the moment she hears Alan's name, her entire demeanor shifts. The calm breaks, her aura explodes into a suffocating crimson pressure, asking why he doesn't want her by his side. As her killing intent surges so strongly, even Ivan freezes. But then she reads the strange words from the letter aloud, and instantly everything changes. The overwhelming bloodlust vanishes, replaced by silence and a faint blush as she whispers that it's a promise only masters would understand, while Ivan stands frozen, realizing those cryptic instructions were actually a coded message meant only for her, and the future bloody queen now clutches the letter like a treasure, her loyalty to Alan cementing itself in that moment. While back at the mansion, Alan is casually buried in books, frustrated as he mutters that he still can't find clues about the third boss. Until Ivan suddenly walks in reporting they've already rescued the second child he mentioned, snapping Alan upright in panic as he urgently asks if the child is being treated properly. Ivan recalls his mission and reports that after rescuing that child from the illegal slave market, everything went smoothly. But before he can finish his sentence, an unwanted voice cuts in. "Hey, isn't this Alan?" And a heavy-built man with a crooked grin walks into the room. This is Tonio Palacio, Alan's second brother and the so-called king of drugs, who immediately puts a hand on Alan's shoulder while mocking him for even holding a book as an illiterate fool, pressing down on his head and demanding he answer. And in that moment, Alan goes completely numb, internally cursing his fate because no matter how many times he tries to adapt, this guy is always a problem. And just as he considers swallowing his pride and bowing out, Tonio suddenly kicks him to the ground and plants his shoe on his head, asking if he even knows his place. But before things can escalate further, a dagger whistles through the air and slams into the wall right beside Tonio's face, instantly draining the color from him as he turns to see the source. Because standing at the door is Leo Palacio, the eldest brother, and the prostitution king, radiating an even more dangerous aura as he coldly warns Tonio to keep his cheap behavior outside the library and get lost, while he still can. And in an instant, the two brothers lock eyes, daggers and tension filling the air like a death match about to erupt, giving Alan exactly one opportunity to do the only thing he can, crawl away for his life. Because this isn't just family drama, it's a ticking war for the inheritance between two underworld monsters. Leo dominating the prostitution empire, and Tonio ruling the drug trade, both of them sworn enemies under the same roof, and the shockwave of their killing intent shakes the entire library as Alan's only thought becomes simple survival. Run, while Ivan quickly rushes in to pull him out of the chaos, dragging him onto a sofa as his strength completely drains out. And even as Ivan watches him collapse, he casually mentions that the other rescued child also didn't seem normal, but Alan barely responds, his mind still recovering from near death, while Ivan quietly starts questioning how his young master even knows about illegal slave markets and hidden bio-experiments across regions, before concluding that Alan is somehow more fragile than he looks when it comes to basic survival. And later, as the situation calms, Ivan continues his report while Alan simply nods, already aware that the ordinary child they rescued is anything but normal. Because this isn't just some victim, it's a walking disaster in waiting. Dios Michaelian, the second boss of psychedelia, a boy who was sold through slavery and broken across countless masters until his suffering awakened the sin of sloth, one of the 5 great sins, whose power later erased entire kingdoms in uncontrollable devastation. A storyline so brutal it made players quit the game outright, and while Alan outwardly sips his tea like nothing is wrong, inside he is shaking because unlike Sloth's future rampage, he is the type who pays back everything with interest, which is exactly why he ordered Ivan to treat the boy gently and even casually told Yutia in that letter to take care of a slightly sick child. While in the orphanage itself, the rescued children play happily except for one boy who stands apart in silence. Deos, broken and withdrawn under the night sky until a pair of shoes suddenly appear in front of him, breaking the loneliness for the first time. Yutia steps closer, her crimson eyes narrowing as she looks at him like she's seeing something beyond human flesh. And she quietly says, You are broken. While her gaze scans Deos and immediately identifies marks no normal person should ever recognize, her voice trembles slightly as she confirms it. These are the marks of that thing, and the moment she says it, her hand tightens, thin and scarred from years of abuse, but still steady enough to name it, the black goat. And then a faint, knowing smile forms on her lips, as if she's already read the ending. Still, the great moon has chosen you. Congratulations. And as her power begins to swirl in the air around them, she leans closer, whispering like a curse and a promise at the same time. Feel it. The power granted to you, let it wake your potential, because if you remain loyal and obey his command, you will get your revenge. And those words ignite something deep inside Dios as a surge of violent purple energy erupts from his small body, his dormant disaster-level power finally breaking free without restraint. While Yutia calmly watches, now already shifting focus as she holds Alan's letter and thinks to herself that it's time to reply, opening it to find something absurdly casual like a normal conversation. Yutia, how are you? I am fine. My second brother used me as a chair today. Haha, funny, right? And similar meaningless daily chatter that somehow exists alongside the fate of future calamities. And just like that, 1 year passes in what feels like a blink, until Ivan suddenly rushes into the library in panic, reporting that something huge has happened. That bastard. No, the second young master has died. And Alan freezes mid-thought as the word hits him like a system error. What? Tonio is dead. Already, because in the original game timeline, his death was supposed to come much later as a major turning point. Yet now everything is diverging, and at the funeral, Alan stands in a cold, colorless hall watching Tonio lie in an open coffin, while the Count casually stands nearby with 2 women looking completely bored like this is just another social obligation. And Alan can't even process it because even in a dark fantasy world, this feels unreal. While Leo stands there with a smug expression like a winner, and Alan immediately realizes something is off. Either Leo killed him or someone under him did, because in the game Leo was supposed to personally murder Tonio after years of blood feud and declare himself heir. But now the timing is wrong, everything is shifting, and Alan silently understands the original route is already collapsing. But he doesn't have time to dwell because he still has to deal with the 5 great sins. And another year passes with unexpected calm as Leo fully absorbs Tonio's drug empire, and the household briefly settles into uneasy stability, while Alan and Ivan enjoy a quiet afternoon tea like nothing is wrong. With Alan now regularly exchanging letters with Yutia, treating her like a pen pal he can subtly guide, reading her latest report about the orphanage where children are growing in strangely specialized ways, like Yuna excelling at hide-and-seek, Hiden becoming absurdly skilled at fighting games, and Deos developing strange talent for puppet control, all while Alan casually concludes they're good kids without realizing how horrifying that actually sounds. And at the bottom of the letter, he notices the sponsorship list growing again, which Ivan also mentions is strange but beneficial, before suddenly shifting tone and revealing the Information Guild has found a clue related to Alan's search. And Alan's eyes instantly light up as he mutters finally, thinking it must be the lead on the third boss, the missing piece of his future prevention plan. And for a moment, everything feels peaceful as he eats cake and imagines steady progress, completely unaware that this calm is a lie built on ignorance. Because at that exact same time, far away at a drug distribution site called Marg, one of Leo's men proudly celebrates their expanding network until the entire facility turns into a silent slaughterhouse in an instant, bodies collapsing as if controlled by invisible strings, survivors screaming as their limbs move against their will, forcing blades into their own throats under an unseen puppet master. And from the shadows emerges Deos, eyes glowing purple as he conducts the massacre like a performance. While beside him, Utia calmly watches like an audience member at an art exhibition, calling it a good puppet show. And when Dios asks what the point of all this is, Utia simply looks at the corpses and replies not with pity, but with cold logic, asking why he would feel sorry for people who grind humans into drugs. While Dios answers flatly that he doesn't care about them either, only whether this has anything to do with his revenge. And Utia simply answers that it will definitely help, as the two future disasters quietly continue evolving in the dark without Alan even realizing how fast the world is moving out of his control. Utia's power flares under the moonlight as she calmly explains that this is only the foundation, the first step in building a place for his return. And when he comes back, how could they possibly leave this world unchanged? While Deos quietly understands without hesitation, as if the answer was always obvious. And in that instant, the two disasters, Wrath and Sloth, stand side by side as their powers surge in sync, a terrifying harmony of crimson and violet energy exploding outward and completely erasing the drug base from the map, leaving nothing behind except a burning crater and silence, before they vanish back into the night like ghosts of an approaching apocalypse, declaring in unison that everything will unfold exactly as he desires, and that they will become the Sword of the Blue Moon. And then 2 years pass since Alan first established his connection with Utia, using her as his eyes and ears inside the orphanage while steadily gathering the remaining future calamities with Ivan's help. But now Ivan returns from another exhausting mission completely drained, stumbling into the backyard and collapsing right in front of Alan, who is casually practicing magic, gasping that he's finally back and confirming he has successfully delivered the fifth one to the orphanage, leaving Alan to exhale in relief because in just 2 years, using his game knowledge and Ivan's relentless effort, he has managed to secure all the remaining sins before their tragic routes could fully begin, even remembering how difficult it was to locate the sin of greed before everything finally aligned. And as a reward, he jokingly offers Ivan a treat, only for Ivan to curse him in exhaustion before Alan reveals a towering pile of macarons, instantly reviving his loyal knight who devours them like a man who hasn't eaten in days, while Alan quietly stands beside him saying everything is finally settled and he can rest now. Though Ivan immediately questions whether the orphanage work is truly complete, prompting Alan to confirm it is, which only makes Ivan sigh in relief before noticing something odd in his master's expression, because Alan claims to be happy but doesn't look it at all, lying on the grass under the sun with a faint forced smile that even Ivan refuses to believe. And as Alan reflects on everything, he realizes just how absurdly smoothly it is all gone, because his entire mission was supposed to be stopping the 5 sins from ever awakening, the future final bosses of psychedelia, each born from unimaginable trauma and destined to become world-ending calamities. But instead of reaching them after their descent into despair, he somehow reached them early enough to change their paths entirely, and now all of them are safe under one orphanage he sponsors, while Ivan reports that everything there is functioning normally and even improving, handing over Utia's latest letter, where she casually reassures him that everything is fine and that there is no need to worry about Dios or the others, and Alan reads it with a strangely innocent satisfaction, believing the environment is genuinely healing them, even concluding that maybe Utia's emotional nature is why she manages the orphanage so well, until Ivan suddenly asks the question Alan has always avoided. When does he plan to meet them? And for the first time, Alan's relaxed expression disappears completely as he answers coldly that he has no intention of ever meeting them, because while keeping distance is safer, their inherent natures are still something that terrifies him even now, especially the memories of what they would become in the original timeline. And although he believes things are different now that he intervened early, the fear hasn't fully disappeared. So after a moment of silence, he compromises on a vague future point, maybe 5 years, while Ivan simply sighs in resignation and accepts it, as Alan quietly realizes that even after everything is solved, he still cannot allow himself to truly relax. Alan forces himself back into training, thinking he absolutely needs skills just to survive in this cursed dark fantasy world. And while he reassures himself that at least magic requires talent and this body seems perfect for it, Ivan suddenly breaks the calm by casually asking if he has ever heard of Blue Moon. And Alan immediately blanks out like the system just failed. Blue what? Never heard of it. until Ivan explains it's a rising organization that's been aggressively hunting down criminal gangs, and Alan half-jokingly dismisses them as just cleaning up trash, even laughing that groups like that always disappear sooner or later. But then Ivan drops the real bomb. He's heard they even kill nobles, and the moment those words land, Alan feels a cold chill crawl down his spine, because suddenly his supposedly peaceful survival plan feels a lot less safe, shouting in panic for Ivan to start sleeping right next to his room from now on, completely unaware that the very same night inside the orphanage he sponsors, the so-called Blue Moon is already holding a meeting, where Utia calmly calls for the weekly report like a gentle leader at a children's gathering, only for one fox-eared girl to cheerfully report she eliminated all the slave traders in the north, proudly introducing herself as Soul Ring, the sin of pride, while another girl, Ren, the sin of greed, reports that the bodies have already been dissolved without trace, and a boy sitting on the stairs casually adds that he handled the South as well, wiping out human testing facilities and reducing Alan's enemies to nothing. This is Raiden, the sin of misophobia, where cleaning literally means total annihilation. And as Utia smiles with eerie satisfaction, declaring everything is proceeding according to his will, it becomes clear that the orphanage Alan thinks is a safe haven is actually a structured death cult, built around his name. A group of future calamities all operating under the belief they exist to serve the Great Moon. But the situation escalates further when Ren reports a problem, revealing that during their operations they discovered a written order linked to Alan's own household instructing that after the Count's death he should be slowly poisoned. And the moment Utia hears that someone has targeted their greatness, her expression darkens completely as killing intent floods the room, and the entire organization shifts from loyal to murderous in an instant. And that consequence arrives 2 years later, when Alan stands at another funeral, this time for Count Palacio, officially labeled a heart failure but clearly the result of poison, while whispers among attendees confirm that Blue Moon has struck again, and the criminal underworld is becoming increasingly terrified of this unseen force. And though no one mourns the Count, Alan quietly processes the horrifying reality that everything around him is escalating faster than the game ever predicted, especially when he notices Leo watching him like a predator already choosing his next move. And later that night in the silent estate, Ivan nervously suggests that Leo might be next, only to freeze when he sees Alan already packing bags and announcing they are leaving immediately, confirming his long-prepared decision to abandon the estate entirely and relocate to Rodmill, the small southern town he had been planning as an escape route, while Leo silently observes their departure from the balcony like a hunter losing sight of prey but not interest. And 3 days later in Rodmill, Alan briefly experiences what he considers true peace for the first time, cooking breakfast and flipping French toast with genuine calm, while Ivan brings juice and the atmosphere feels almost normal, until that fragile peace shatters as Alan suddenly wakes up in shock, clutching his head. I am back. And suddenly I'm standing in that cold, lifeless funeral hall again. The peaceful breakfast in Rodmill just a dream that never actually existed. And the moment Alan realizes this, he feels a strange wrongness in the air, because something about this funeral is completely off. And as he studies the scene, he confirms the cause of death instantly, stab wound directly through the heart. So the question immediately hits him, who killed him? Because this is not the timeline he remembers anymore. Everything is starting to fracture, and while he is thinking this, his eyes accidentally lock onto a nearby guard who instantly freezes in terror like he just saw a monster, screaming apologies to his mother before being dragged away by his partner, leaving Alan confused because he didn't even do anything. And then Ivan finally pushes through the crowd and reaches him, asking in a low voice if the young master is the one responsible for Leon's disappearance overnight, and that single accusation hits harder than anything else, because Alan is completely speechless. Realizing that the cute orphanage he thought he was managing is apparently running around causing real-world chaos without his control. And then the story snaps into a flashback to the day he fled to Rodmill, the day that unknowingly set everything into motion. As Alan sits in the buggy and firmly insists to Ivan that Rodmill is the final destination with absolute certainty, convinced it's the perfect safe zone away from the main story, a quiet place where he can retire after preventing the Five Sins apocalypse, while Ivan questions the logic but gets shut down immediately. And Alan insists it's all part of a perfect survival plan, completely unaware that from the shadows Leo is already watching from the balcony of the Palacio estate, calculating whether Alan is even worth killing anymore and casually deciding he might have already poisoned him anyway, before ordering an assassin to follow the buggy. Except that assassin, Alman, suddenly turns and asks if the target should be killed, breaking the expected script and freezing Leo in shock, because this is the first time his loyal tool has ever questioned him. And before Leo can even process it, the assassin reveals his true identity as Hedon, a member of Blue Moon. And in an instant, the situation flips as Hedon coldly declares that anyone who threatens the Great Moon has no right to exist, stabbing Leo without hesitation and leaving him collapsing in disbelief while Hedon disappears into the night like nothing happened. And all of this unfolds completely outside Alan's awareness, as he believes he is simply enjoying a peaceful new life in Rodmill, unaware that the consequences of his safe plan are already rewritten. He wakes up to a perfect morning and stretches with a yawn, completely at peace, greeting Rodmill like it's paradise itself, because for once there are no assassins, no noble conspiracies, no death flags, just quiet days, soft beds, and a life where he can actually breathe. And while casually eating breakfast with Ivan, he even starts fantasizing about opening a toast stall like a normal retired noble, genuinely believing he has finally escaped the nightmare. But that fragile illusion shatters the moment Ivan rushes in holding a letter, and Alan instantly freezes mid-bite as the toast drops from his fork like his soul just left his body. Because the letter is a summons back to the estate for Leo's funeral, and in an instant his 4 days of paradise are over as he is dragged back into the cold, silent hall of the Palacio estate, where he stands before his brother's coffin and immediately notices something deeply wrong. Everyone is terrified, whispering, shaking, avoiding his gaze like he's some kind of disaster incarnate. And before he can process it, Ivan suddenly appears right next to him and whispers something that nearly deletes his sanity, asking since when he became the shadow leader. And Alan is pulled aside into a quiet corner where Ivan, far too confident for his own good, lays out a terrifyingly logical deduction that after they left the estate, Leo was murdered, and Alan has the perfect alibi to inherit everything, meaning he must be the mastermind behind it all. And while Alan internally screams at the nonsense, Ivan continues building his case like a detective possessed, pushing him deeper into the role of an invisible underworld king, until Alan desperately tries to reason it out logically, thinking no single organization should be able to eliminate someone like Leo so cleanly, unless it's one of those groups that hunts criminals. And the moment Ivan mentions Blue Moon, he immediately corrects himself, saying the Information Guild confirmed it wasn't them, because Blue Moon always leaves a crescent mark, while this massacre was pure sword-based slaughter with no signature at all, meaning a completely different kind of killer is responsible. And just like that, Alan realizes the situation has spiraled into something far worse, because in his mind, Blue Moon was supposed to be irrelevant, a prologue-level faction that shouldn't even matter anymore. But at that exact moment, far away inside the orphanage, Blue Moon is holding a post-mission meeting like nothing happened, with Utia calmly asking for confirmation of cleanup, while Ren, the sin of greed, reports that nothing remains. Cellaring, the sin of pride, casually confirms the site was reduced to corpses, and Radon, the sin of misophobia, steps out of the shadows reporting in a chilling tone that hundreds of Alam's soldiers have already been eliminated, followed by another sin proudly stating that the remaining forces were cut down without issue, as if they are discussing routine chores instead of mass slaughter. And Utia simply smiles with terrifying satisfaction, declaring everything perfect, while elsewhere Blue Moon continues its systematic purge of Alan's entire underworld network, erasing it from existence in just days, until Radon quietly places a folder on the table revealing another list of noble families tied to their target, and one name immediately draws attention with deadly intent, while Utia's expression turns unreadable as she silently orders total continuation, confirming that Blue Moon's hunt is still ongoing. And before the next phase begins, she double-checks one final thing, whether the Information Guild has any remaining trace that could reach them, or him. The entire world behind his back. Ren confirms that this matter is being handled separately from Blue Moon, while Cellaring excitedly waves a document like a child waiting for the next hunt, and Radon coldly spits out his hatred for other guilds, claiming they're all the same trash hiding behind rules. And as the discussion continues, Ren asks if she should keep monitoring movements, only for Utia to give a short, absolute yes, followed by a chilling warning that this must never reach that person's ears, as she pulls the folder close to her chest, and for the first time a faint trace of fear slips across her expression, something completely alien on the face of the leader of Minus Blue Moon, while Radon tries to argue that they were targeted first, so it's not even a command. But Utia immediately shuts it down, explaining their only principle, that they are swords and swords do not think for themselves, and her voice hardens as she reminds them that Blue Moon moves only on orders, especially because that person already knows everything, so they must never fail him, and the weight of her words crushes the young assassins into silence. Though Radon remains confused as he tightens his grip on the folder and silently decides that no matter what, his loyalty is absolute. Everything exists only for the Great Moon, while beneath it all, Blue Moon continues operating from a hidden mansion-like base under the stars, concealing the kingdom's most dangerous secret organization in plain sight. And on the other side, Alan's dream of peaceful retirement has completely collapsed into endless paperwork as he groans face first into a mountain of documents, realizing it has already been a month since the funeral, and every single day has turned into mind-crushing administrative hell, as he cries internally that he just wants to travel and eat like a normal noble, while his entire retirement plan falls apart because Leo's early death has shifted all inheritance responsibility onto him 6 years too soon. And just when he feels like he can't take it anymore, another knock at the door brings yet more servants carrying additional stacks of paperwork, causing him to scream internally in despair, while the staff, terrified of his exhausted expression and sharp gaze, misinterpret it as rage and decide they must work even harder to avoid dying, completely unaware that Alan is now suffering under the reputation of a hidden mastermind. And as he collapses under the weight of bureaucracy, he wonders why Ivan isn't coming when called, only to find him casually roasting chicken skewers by the fireplace, where Ivan instead focuses on something unexpected, Alan's strength, pointing out that in just 2 years he has already reached second-tier poisoncraft through self-study, something that should normally take 4 years. And while Ivan praises his talent, Alan shrugs it off casually, claiming it's decent, but internally he admits he only pushed himself because of constant fear of death flags, because survival pressure is the only thing keeping him moving, while Ivan explains how rare such magical control is. And Alan quietly reflects on how everything in this world once felt exciting, but has now turned into a dangerous, unstable path, where even his smallest progress feels like it might spiral into something far worse. He finally learns something cruel about this world. Mana talent is basically like being born into a weight class. Some people start huge, some start tiny, and no matter how hard you train, you can't change the size. And unfortunately, our guy got the worst role possible. His mana pool is ridiculously small. Like, embarrassingly small, meaning even if he trains forever, he'll never become a top mage. But he doesn't completely give up, because he remembers there's still one risky method that can fix it if things go bad. Right then, Ivan walks in, saying his invitation to the grand ball finally arrived, and Alan just blinks, completely lost about what ball he's talking about. A few days later, he shows up at the event dressed in ridiculously noble fashion, looking like a proper count already, but internally he's already exhausted, even though he just arrived. This isn't some fun party either. It's basically a noble networking battlefield in the southern region of the Asteria Kingdom, and since he's about to officially inherit the title, he has no choice but to attend. So he goes serious mode, thinking this is his golden chance to build connections and secure his peaceful retirement. Except the moment he tries, everyone starts running away from him, literally running. He waves politely, they panic, he approaches, they retreat. It's like he walked in with a murder aura. Ivan tries to cheer him up, but Alan insists he expected this and heads off alone, determined to try harder, still misunderstanding the situation. He thinks they're just looking down on him as a weak noble without backing, which is partially true, but the real reason is far worse. The rumors say he killed both his brothers and controls a shadow organization, so naturally everyone thinks he's a monster. Still, he grabs a wine glass and tells himself he came prepared, activating the social skills he practiced alone, commenting on the aroma to start conversation. But because his face barely shows emotion, his smile looks terrifying, like a villain praising poison. He tells a noble lady he'd love to have a few bottles at home, believing he's being friendly, while she hears it as a threat and immediately promises to send them to his estate. To everyone else, it looks like he just blackmailed her for rare wine. Ivan watches in disbelief while Alan convinces himself she was just shy. And it keeps happening. Every time he speaks, nobles hand him gifts out of fear. Rare tea, luxury items, regional specialties. His networking accidentally turns into extortion. Soon he's sitting in a corner depressed while Ivan happily eats, joking that his gift pile keeps growing. That's when it finally hits him just how infamous he's become. People genuinely believe he murdered his brothers and runs an invisible syndicate. Feeling drained, he steps outside for air, wondering where everything went wrong, and that's when he notices a red-haired girl nearby. Before he can think further, a soft voice calls from behind, asking for a moment. He turns, but sees no one, then looks down and finds a tiny girl introducing herself as Loria, the third daughter of Duke Alia. The moment he hears Alia, alarms go off in his head, because in the game Psychedelia, the Alia family were one of the 3 major shadow players known as the Northern Troublemakers. That realization stings a little, because for a second he thought someone normal finally talked to him. But nope, another dangerous name from the game. What confuses him more is that he doesn't remember this girl at all, which immediately raises a red flag. Loria doesn't waste time either. She straight up asks him to lend her his strength, because she's about to face an assassination attempt. She explains her father is dying. She's been surviving under the protection of his mistress, and once he's gone, her older sisters will definitely try to erase her. Hearing that, Alan can't help but remember his own situation with his brothers, and then it clicks. The reason he never saw her in the game is probably because she died before the story even began. Loria, still looking tiny and harmless, pleads again, saying with his power he could easily protect her. But Alan shuts it down immediately. She even offers half of the Alia family fortune, basically throwing everything she has on the table. Yet he still refuses. Not because he doesn't care, but because he knows the truth. He's barely managing his own survival. His mana is tiny, his strength is average, and his reputation is doing all the heavy lifting. Helping her would just give false hope. So he walks away, but the guilt sticks, especially when he remembers her disappointed face, quietly wishing her luck before heading back inside. Meanwhile, not far away, Deos and Ren have been watching the entire conversation from the shadows, immediately treating this as a potential threat. Deos considers reporting to the Red Moon, their codename for Utia, but Ren calmly explains it's fine. According to their information, Loria is the only member of the Alia family not connected to Avalon, which means she isn't a target. The rest of her household, however, is already marked for elimination, and Ronan, the sin of misophobia, has gone to handle it. They've basically decided the entire Alia family will disappear, all under Utia's orders, and their current mission is making sure Alan never finds out anything related to Avalon. Back inside, Alan is still confused why everyone keeps avoiding him, wondering if he's accidentally radiating some invisible barrier, when suddenly the red-haired woman he noticed earlier walks up to him. For the first time tonight, he feels genuinely happy, thinking maybe he can finally socialize normally, but the moment he turns and sees her clearly, his brain immediately recognizes the face. Another shadow player. Of course, no normal person would approach him first. He greets her politely, calling her Lady Zenonia, which instantly surprises her because she never introduced herself. He casually explains she's famous, since in the Asteria Kingdom there are 3 major shadow families, the Alia in the north, the Palacio in the east, and the Zenonia in the west. This red-haired beauty is the eldest daughter of Count Zenonia Clea, someone who runs a sophisticated criminal syndicate instead of brute force operations. Just thinking about her background makes him want to back away slowly, because all he wants are peaceful, noble connections, not underworld alliances. So he bows politely, compliments her beauty like he's preparing to escape, but she stops him, saying she wants to discuss something important. He tries to dodge again, saying there are too many eyes watching them right now. Deep down, he's just praying she leaves him alone, because every shadow player he meets equals future disaster, but she simply smiles and says he's exactly like the rumors, adding she's looking forward to seeing him again before walking away, leaving him completely confused. He keeps wondering if that was some coded message, something hidden behind her words, but eventually shakes it off and convinces himself he's overthinking. Meanwhile, from a distance, Ren and Dios watch the interaction and quietly note that everything is going smoothly. Their master is still completely in the dark, but then Dios suddenly notices something off. Through the window, he spots a suspicious figure tailing Alan for a while now, and without wasting a second, the two of them disappear to handle the threat before it ever reaches him. The next day, Alan drags Ivan into a forest, asking if this is the canyon he was searching for, and Ivan points out something strange. It's midday, the sun is bright, yet the canyon ahead looks unnaturally dark. Alan doesn't care at all though. He's practically glowing with excitement because this is the place he's been looking for. As they step inside, he jokes that if this turns out to be another empty location, he might actually cry. But the moment he sees the symbols carved into the walls, he knows it's real. This is the Labyrinth of Whispers. In the game, it was a hidden dungeon with 8 riddle rooms, and clearing all of them rewards a powerful artifact, the exact item he came for. He even admits the only reason he traveled south using the ball as an excuse was to find this labyrinth. Ivan is confused how he knows all this, while Alan casually claims he memorized every route and puzzle from the game. They soon reach a massive stone door, and Alan pauses for a moment, genuinely amazed seeing it in real life, saying it feels far more real than the game ever did. Ivan asks how he even knew this place existed, and Alan accidentally says he's been here many times before, instantly realizing he messed up, quickly laughing it off as a joke before pushing forward. Inside, monsters appear along with giant stone hands ready to crush them if they fail the riddle. Ivan tenses up, thinking one wrong answer means instant death, but Alan calmly solves it without hesitation. Watching this, Ivan reflects how they've been together for 4 years, and he still doesn't understand him at all. Saving orphans, helping slaves, paying random debts, sending meaningless letters, and now solving ancient labyrinth puzzles like he's reading a script. In Ivan's mind, his master is a complete mystery, yet every strange action somehow leads to good outcomes, which is why he keeps following him. After clearing the trials, they finally enter a treasure chamber filled with golden artifacts, but Alan ignores everything and walks straight toward a hand statue covered in rings, pointing at the black one and saying that's their target. Ivan, meanwhile, is already stuffing gold into his pockets and asks why he wants the most worthless-looking ring. Alan explains taking anything else could trigger traps later, but internally he knows the truth. This is the Ring of Oath Restraint, the item he desperately needed. Once he grabs it, they immediately leave, and Alan feels satisfied thinking everything went perfectly. Thanks to his game knowledge, he secured one of the most important items without trouble. But right as he's feeling proud, Ivan suddenly senses something off. The rock piles they passed earlier aren't just rocks, they're golems, and now they're slowly waking up. The ground trembles, stone bodies start shifting, and Ivan instantly moves into battle mode, realizing this is a nightmare scenario. These aren't normal enemies, they're unknown constructs, and his second-tier magic probably won't even scratch them. In his mind, the priority becomes simple: get his young master out even if he has to die here, but Alan calmly tells him to stand down, saying he'll handle it himself. Ivan panics and tells him to find an escape route first, but Alan just lifts his hand and activates the black ring. The moment he invokes the Oath of Restraint, everything freezes. Time slows, the world fades, and suddenly he's standing in a dark cosmic space facing a massive presence. A voice echoes, introducing itself as a fragment inheriting the will of Nasilla, asking him to declare 2 restrictions he wishes to impose on himself. In the game, this was just a choice window, but hearing it directly while staring at a gigantic face in the void is way more intimidating. The artifact works by trading freedom for power. The harsher the restriction, the stronger the reward. Even Alan feels pressure from the voice, but he sticks to the plan he memorized. For the first restraint, he declares that he will always perform the hand signs of Babylonia whenever casting magic. The voice asks what he desires in return, and he answers that he wants the ability to bend the laws of the world slightly more. The entity accepts, then asks for the second restraint. Without hesitation, he declares he will always chant the words of Babylonia when using magic. When asked what he seeks, he boldly says even greater power to defy the world's laws. The entity pauses for a moment, which makes him nervous, wondering if he messed something up, but he trusts the combination he memorized from the game. Finally, the voice confirms the restraints are granted, thanking the human who remembered the gestures of the forgotten god, something Alan doesn't fully understand. But before he can think further, the ring dissolves into his body. Time resumes instantly, and the golems are already attacking. Ivan rushes forward, but Alan calmly begins casting. He even laughs a little, because in the game this spell looked gigantic, while now with his tiny mana pool it starts as a small spark. Still, he performs the hand signs, activating the restriction boost, then chants the first word, refraction, and the magic stabilizes, then repulsion, and the small spark swells rapidly, turning into a bright blue electric sphere. Ivan's eyes widen as the spell keeps growing far beyond what Alan's mana should allow. With another hand sign, he adds direction, and the energy condenses into a terrifying beam. Then he releases it in one grand motion, the blast tearing forward like a compressed wave of destruction, looking ridiculously similar to a hollow purple-style attack. The moment the attack lands, the entire canyon lights up in blue lightning, and every single golem gets erased like they were made of sand. Not cracked, not damaged, just gone. Ivan stands there frozen, staring at the empty battlefield, trying to process what he just witnessed. After a few seconds, he finally asks if Alan has been hiding his real power this whole time, but Alan immediately denies it. Ivan explains that in 15 years as a mercenary, he's never seen second-tier magic do anything even close to that, and asks again if he's really sure that was second tier. Alan confirms it, though internally he's just as confused, because this result is way beyond what he expected. In the game, magic worked in turns. You could enhance a spell step by step using hand signs and incantations, stacking effects before releasing it. What he just did was basically chain lightning boosted through 5 steps, 1 base cast plus 4 enhancements. Normally that just increased damage numbers, but because of the Oath of Restraint, he's now forced to use hand signs and chants every time, meaning every spell automatically stacks buffs. Even then, the scale he just produced shouldn't have been possible with his tiny mana pool. So while Ivan is relieved they survived, Alan is quietly shaken by how absurd the output was. Ivan drops to sit down, saying watching that fight was more exhausting than fighting himself, and asks who in the world built such a horrible canyon. That question makes Alan remember something. In the game, the Labyrinth of Whispers had another name, the Maze of Paladon, and strategy guides said it was created by someone named Paladon. He casually tells Ivan that, but Ivan is too tired to even react. Alan then grabs him, saying they need to head back immediately because he wants to test something once they return. Ivan is confused why his usually lazy master suddenly looks motivated, and Alan explains his theory. When the hand sign matches the spell's attribute, power increases. When the chant matches, the spell gains additional properties. That's how the game mechanics worked. The difference is that in the game visuals didn't change, only numbers did. But here the spell physically evolves with each step. He also wonders if this only works for him because of his unusually precise mana control, deciding he'll test it later once his mana recovers. For now, he's just glad they survived. As they prepare to leave, however, someone else arrives at the canyon. Ren, who had been secretly following them, walks inside and studies the walls. She recognizes the runes immediately, saying they're glyphs from the Alan Empire describing the era of forgotten outer gods. Then she spots another line carved in a corner and reads it aloud, something about a friend left alone by the coward Palin. As she keeps examining, a smile forms on her face. According to the inscriptions, the one who halted the invasion of dark creatures and defeated the calamity that devoured citizens' hearts was Emperor Palin the Great. She knows this because she inherited knowledge from the ancient library tied to her existence. Remembering Alan casually mentioning Palin earlier, she completely misinterprets the situation again, concluding he must have known all of this beforehand. In her mind, someone followed by the bloody Queen Utia and knowledgeable about forgotten emperors can only be a figure of destiny, reinforcing her belief that Alan is far more extraordinary than anyone realizes. But Ren completely misreads everything, convincing herself that Alan must somehow be connected to Palin personally. In her mind, the phrases he used while casting magic don't even exist in the ancient library she inherited, which only makes him seem more mysterious. She even blushes slightly, admitting Utia was right about him all along, feeling embarrassed that she ever doubted their great moon. Just like that, Alan unknowingly gains even more blind followers. Right then, Dios arrives, and Ren immediately asks about the person who had been tailing their master. Dios casually replies the guy is already dead, but not by his hand. He says the man's head just twisted midair and snapped, like something invisible killed him. Ren immediately decides they should report this to Utia, since anything near their master is suspicious, and the two of them leave. Meanwhile, in Zenonia territory, Lady Zenonia sits calmly drinking tea, thinking about Alan. She recalls his emotionless face, those abyss-like eyes, and the fact he called her famous. That detail bothers her, because publicly she isn't very active. The truth is, she's the real mastermind of her family, secretly controlling her own father using black magic and acting as the hidden ruler. So when Alan casually called her famous, she assumes he knows her secret. She also remembers him saying there were too many eyes watching them, and interprets that as him detecting the spy she sent. Just then a servant rushes in saying there's a problem. When she checks her room, she finds the corpse of the spy she assigned to follow Alan. The seal on the body is intact, meaning he didn't reveal anything. But she quickly realizes the killer deliberately returned the corpse to her. That makes her certain Alan exposed her move and responded with a warning. Once again, a massive misunderstanding makes Alan look like a terrifying mastermind. Elsewhere in the Alia estate, Loria walks through the quiet halls feeling exhausted and hopeless. She keeps thinking about Alan rejecting her, concluding he's exactly the kind of underworld figure she must never antagonize. He was her last chance, but she knows she had nothing left to offer. Her siblings already stripped her of assets and influence, leaving her surviving only because of her father's protection, and now even that is fading. Lost in despair, she wonders what to do next. But the moment she enters the estate, the maids rush toward her in panic. They announce that 2 of her siblings suddenly took their own lives. Loria freezes in shock, unable to understand it. These were people ruthless enough to kill family, yet they died themselves. Fear immediately grips her as she asks about the remaining siblings, realizing something far more terrifying might be happening. She's then shown an even more horrifying scene. The remaining siblings, Talon and Marianne, are lying on the floor, their swords stabbed straight into each other's chests. Loria's body trembles as terror takes over. None of this makes sense. These people would kill others without hesitation, yet now they're dead together. Her mind is still spinning when outside the estate, Radin is seen leaving quietly with a faint smirk, muttering that the elimination was successful. That's when Loria remembers Alan's earlier words, how he calmly said things would work out, and a chill runs down her spine. She starts connecting everything, believing he planned this entire outcome. Overnight, she became the sole successor of the ducal family. A bitter laugh escapes her as she wonders what kind of monster she tried to bargain with, but she also realizes there's no turning back now. Anyone who opposed him ended up dead, and she convinces herself she must walk the path she chose, no matter how dark it becomes. 2 months later, a grand gift arrives at Alan's estate. Ivan's eyes widen when he sees it, because it's a bottle of Cernant's wine, something absurdly expensive. Alan reads the letter and discovers it's from Loria, which confuses him immediately. He remembers he refused to help her, so why send such a gift? He even asks the servant if it's really for him, and the servant replies that the Duke herself prepared it personally. That single phrase makes Alan pause. Duke herself. That means Loria became the Duke. The scene shifts to Loria sitting in her office, surrounded by documents, now officially the head of the Alia family. 2 months passed quickly. Her father died from illness, and she inherited the title during the succession ceremony. She reflects on how she once couldn't even enter this room, yet now she controls everything. The deaths of her siblings were sudden, but no one suspected her, and she even had a perfect alibi from attending the ball. She believes Alan orchestrated everything from the shadows, rejecting her request publicly while eliminating obstacles behind the scenes. In her mind, he planned far into the future, and intentionally made her the Duke. She even thinks he didn't attend the funeral because he didn't want attention, yet still helped her regardless. To her, it's obvious he needs the Alia family for a bigger plan. She's already unified the subordinate organizations under her command, but she still believes it's nowhere near the power Alan secretly controls. So she concludes he must want something from her, probably political influence, since she can manipulate noble society from the shadows. Convincing herself she's now part of his grand scheme, she hopes the wine she sent will be seen as proper gratitude, and quietly waits for the day he contacts her. The scene shifts back to Alan standing quietly in his room while Loria's servant bows and says he will follow his lead. Alan just stands there, still processing everything, because the girl who begged him for help is suddenly the Duke, and none of it makes sense to him. Ivan notices his strange expression but doesn't ask, and time moves forward. A few months pass, and narration reveals this is 5 years before the original story begins. Ivan walks in excitedly calling him young master, then quickly corrects himself to count. Alan calmly says the succession ceremony hasn't happened yet, but since it's already been a year, he guesses it's fine. Even so, he sighs quietly, because he never planned on inheriting anything. Still, since he's stuck with the title, he decides to use it to his advantage. Ivan then hands him a letter from Utia, and Alan takes it while asking if there's any update on Leo's assassins. They move to the library, sit down, and Ivan replies that the Information Guild still hasn't found anything. After that, he asks what Alan's next goal is, assuming revenge isn't his intention anymore. Alan thinks for a moment, and concludes that all the differences from the game are probably butterfly effects caused by his own actions. So instead of predicting everything, he should just prepare for unexpected changes. Ivan comments he's starting to sound like a real count, which Alan brushes off before finally opening the letter. Utia writes warmly, asking if he's doing well, saying everyone at the orphanage is fine, and now pursuing hobbies. Dios has turned his puppet shows into something almost professional. Seol plays and studies with friends. Rihar spends time reading and crafting, and Radon has started gardening. As Alan reads, a soft smile appears on his face. These monthly letters became something he genuinely treasures, Even though he's never met them, hearing they're growing well gives him real comfort. Then it hits him. The kids aren't kids anymore. 5 years have passed. Ivan notices and casually confirms they're already ready to step into society. Some even left earlier. Alan realizes the children he saved are now grown, no longer fragile, and quietly decides it's time to let them go. Ivan is surprised, reminding him he gathered them together because they were dangerous. But Alan says that's no longer necessary. He believes he prevented their awakening, so they should live normal lives now. Ivan agrees, saying they're healthy and independent. As Alan thinks back to the game, he recalls that each boss had a narrative hint, and Utia, the Sin of Wrath, possessed the talent of faith. He starts recalling their talents one by one. Utia had the talent of faith, Deos had the talent of the sword, Ren possessed the talent of a study, Seol Rang had the talent of a fighter, and Radon carried the talent of an apostle. If each of them followed the right path, they could live normal, successful lives instead of becoming disasters. The thought makes him satisfied, convincing himself everything worked perfectly. Since he's already thinking about their future, he decides to prepare gifts for each of them as well, something to help them when they step into society. Evening arrives, work ends, and Ivan stretches before saying he'll step out for a bit. Alan waves him off, left alone in the quiet office. He smiles softly, wondering if someday they might send something back once they become successful, hoping his letters helped guide them forward. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Utia receives a new letter from Alan and gathers everyone, announcing that orders have arrived. This time, each of them received their own letter individually. The group goes quiet as they open them, Seol Rang barely containing her excitement, eyes sparkling like a kid opening gifts. Utia suggests they first review the previous instructions, since the new ones seem more serious. She explains that Alan giving personal letters means he believes they're ready to act independently now. Seol Rang reads the opening line clumsily, something simple like asking how they've been and telling them to rely on their talents. Ren comments it sounds like small talk, but Utia understands the meaning behind it. The simple greeting is just the surface. In reality, this is the first time he's sending them out separately, defining roles and assigning paths. To them, it feels like he's finally entrusting them with missions. Deos nods, saying this also prevents information leaks, while others wonder whether they should contact him directly instead. Utia shuts that down immediately, saying their duty is only to follow his orders. They finally read the assignments. Deos is told to head to Caliban, the Night Nation. Seol Rang is assigned elsewhere and complains about the location. Radon is sent to Rexy, the entertainment city. Ren receives orders to go to Latina, the mage city. And finally, Utia herself is assigned to the Holy Kingdom of Risa. Each letter clearly instructs them to pursue specific paths. Deos is even told to become a knight, which surprises him, but they all accept the orders without question, believing this is part of Alan's grand plan. Shang adds that Alan also promised their patronage would continue, while Ren points out he even revealed the locations of their gifts. Radon calmly says everything will make sense once they reach their destinations. Utia then gathers everyone and repeats the final rule Alan gave them. They must never mention the name Blue Moon. Everyone agrees, and the next day they all leave to carry out his orders. 3 months later, Alan sits in his office sighing, because despite all his studying, his magic hasn't improved much. He keeps reading advanced texts, muttering that he'll probably need to experiment himself. Then he notices Ivan and suddenly remembers, asking about the investigation into Leo's death. Ivan replies the Information Guild still found nothing. That surprises Alan, and he quietly concludes the butterfly effects from saving the 5 sins are already spiraling out of control. Even Loria, who shouldn't have survived, became Duke and is now rapidly expanding her influence in the underworld. He lets out a tired laugh and tells Ivan to stop investigating Leo's death entirely. Digging deeper into unknown organizations could be dangerous, and if he accidentally provokes someone, the consequences could be fatal. In his mind, as long as he doesn't interfere, no secret group has any reason to target him, so continuing the investigation is pointless. Ivan nods and agrees to notify the guild, but then remembers another piece of news. Deos has recently been appointed as a knight in Caliban. Alan looks surprised but happy, saying that's good for him. 3 months later, Ivan returns again with snacks and another update, saying Deos has formed his own knight order. Alan straightens up, realizing that means he must already be expert level, maybe even approaching swordmaster. Ivan confirms Deos reached sword expert rank, and people across the continent are already talking about him, saying he might become the 5th master knight within 10 years. Alan raises an eyebrow, realizing Deos is now being called the Sword of Caliban, and quietly admires the progress. 6 months later, almost a year after the 5 left, Alan has mostly adjusted to count duties when Ivan rushes in again with urgent news. Deos has officially become the Sword of Caliban. Alan freezes, understanding what that implies. Only a swordmaster can earn that title, meaning Deos already reached master level. Alan explains that a swordmaster in Physidalia isn't just strong. It's someone who surpasses Aura Blade and unlocks a unique ability called Deviation, basically stepping into the realm of superhumans. He looks at Ivan and asks if Deos really reached that level, but Ivan clarifies she hasn't created her deviation yet. However, the nation still granted her the title title of Master Knight. She defeated the fourth sword in a duel, and Caliban also lost one of their Master Knights in the war against the northern barbarians, so they elevated her early. Alan thinks about it, remembering that mastering mana alone takes around 5 years, and creating deviation usually takes decades. The youngest Master Knight in history, Rehornet, became one at 32 after wielding a sword since childhood. Even with that talent, it took him more than 20 years. Meanwhile, Deos only picked up the sword recently and is already at that level. Alan realizes that once she develops deviation, she'll officially surpass even Rehornet, and a small smile appears on his face as he mutters he might be able to benefit from her sooner than expected. Ivan quietly notes his reaction. Alan then looks at the letters again, saying he only ever receives updates from Utia. Even after she left for the Holy Kingdom, she kept sending letters with news about everyone. He sighs jokingly that none of them even thanked him for the gifts, then quickly corrects himself, saying he's just glad they didn't turn into disasters and destroy kingdoms. As long as they're living well, he's genuinely satisfied. The scene then shifts to Caliban, where the central district is filled with high-ranked nobles and the grand mansion of the Scaplift Knight Order stands proudly. Knights train everywhere, and at the top of the hill stands Dios in full knight uniform, calm, tall, and completely different from his childhood self. His title echoes across the region, Dios Macallion, captain of the Scaplift Knight Order, youngest Master Knight in history. A girl waves happily, calling him brother, and he smiles back, looking far more composed. He remembers the past, the day he lost everything, when black corruption consumed his family and his sister fell into darkness. He was drowning in rage, nearly imprisoned, completely lost, until the Great Moon saved him. He pledged loyalty not out of admiration, but desperation, believing it was the only path left. Missions under Blue Moon were always dangerous, but he accepted them all, treating each as a step toward revenge. Years later, he finally received his first personal order, which confused him. Instead of elimination, it directed him to a small inn in southern Caliban to retrieve a gift. At first he didn't care, because gifts meant nothing to someone who had already lost everything. But the moment he reached the location, everything changed. Dios instantly understood what the gift meant. Standing there, alive and safe, was his sister, the one he believed had died long ago. His eyes tremble as he reads the final line of the letter saying the gift from the Great Moon is the family he thought he lost forever. He breaks down completely, tears pouring out as he rushes forward and hugs her tightly. She freezes in shock, barely recognizing the brother she thought was gone, while Deos clings to her like she might disappear again. His voice shakes as he asks what happened after they were separated. She begins to cry too, holding his arm gently, and after calming down, they sit together with tea. She explains that after being taken away, she was locked in darkness, trapped in a cage waiting to be killed. Just when she thought it was over, someone incredibly strong appeared and pulled her into the light, saving her. Years later, when she was about to be sold to slave traders, another swordsman cut them down and protected her again. That person was Ivan, Alan's knight. Returning to the present, she explains that afterward she kept receiving medicine and support from a mysterious sponsor. Holding the letter, she says everything was sent under Alan's name, and that he specifically instructed the knight to deliver it personally. Hearing this, Deos freezes. That means the Great Moon had been protecting his sister all this time. He already knew she meant everything to him, and now realizes someone else knew it too. She smiles warmly, saying she's deeply grateful to the sponsor who saved her life, repeatedly. Meanwhile, Deos is stunned, whispering that the Great Moon used his own identity to protect her. He can't understand how he even knew about her, because he never told anyone about his family. Only Utia ever noticed hints of his past. He starts piecing things together, remembering her strange reactions whenever the Great Moon was mentioned, her insistence that a sword must follow its master, and her unwavering devotion. Slowly, the realization hits him that everything connects back to the same person. He grips his shoulders, overwhelmed, wondering how the Great Moon knew everything about him. To him, this only reinforces the idea that the Great Moon sees all hidden truths and has been guiding them from the beginning. His thoughts spiral until his sister pulls him back, asking why he suddenly looks so shocked. Inside, Dias finally understands everything. He realizes his sword had acted on its own, yet the Great Moon still showed mercy. From his perspective, it now feels like Alan had been guiding his entire life from the shadows, carefully arranging every step like a long-planned strategy. All those years he spent drowning in hatred and chasing revenge suddenly feel meaningless. He looks at his sister again, smiling brightly after surviving that terrifying darkness. And to him, that alone feels like a miracle. In his mind, only one person could have made this happen, the Great Moon. Yusa's words echo again. She always said one day he would understand why she followed that terrifying man. Now he finally gets it. She wasn't blindly loyal. She chose this path on her own, and still treated Alan like a god. That realization hardens Dace's expression. He decides his goal is simple: reach the peak of Caliban, become a master knight, and create his own Knight Order made of elite swordsmen devoted to the Great Moon. From that moment, he fully commits to the path of sword mastery, and the foundation of his Knight Order begins to form. Sometime later, he stands on a balcony as a knight approaches and tells him everything is ready. Deus steps forward and looks down at the assembled knights waiting below. This will be their first expedition, the first step of the Solar Skeleton Knights. He grips his terrifying sword and declares that one day he will repay the Great Moon properly. His loyalty is absolute, his determination unwavering. With that, the Solar Skeleton Knights march out toward the barbarian lands. Meanwhile, Alan is completely unaware of all this happening in his name. He's just sitting quietly, thinking the estate feels peaceful now that everyone has left. He mutters that things got too chaotic and he'd rather not gather more information for now. Instead, he focuses on researching the magic phrases he used in the labyrinth. He reviews his notes, analyzing how refraction expands the imperfections of a spell and increases its output, while repulsion distorts the structure and boosts the projectile's force. The more he studies it, the more amazed he becomes. With the Oath of Restraint, he can actually bend the rules of magic itself. He even concludes that blue light strengthens parallel magic like lightning, while diffraction lines increase penetration and create critical damage. That explains why the golem earlier was completely vaporized. Still, he sighs because even with all this knowledge, his mana is tiny, meaning he can only use that level of magic once per day. Fatigue finally starts catching up to him. It took months just to figure out this much. The problem is, the hand signs and chants of Babylonia don't exist in this world anymore. No books, no records, nothing. So he has to rebuild everything from scratch using only his game knowledge. Still, he weirdly enjoys it. Even though he only learned magic for self-defense, now he's completely absorbed in research. After 2 months of testing, he finally tries a new spell. He puts his fingers together and a crackling purple light forms in front of him. He explains that removing the focal point creates instability, which forces lightning to form. A small purple sphere appears. He calls it weak, just a basic fluxation spell. But the moment he finishes chanting, thunder ripples outward and the structure completes. Then he adds another chant, compression. The magic tightens, condensing into a dense core as the spell reshapes itself. Finally, he completes the last hand sign, and boom, a violent thunder cannon shoots straight into the sky. The ground shakes as massive lightning floods the area like a roaring wave. Even Alan freezes shocked by his own power. The order of phrases mattered more than anything. When he tried a different order before, it failed instantly. Suddenly, a voice behind him says, "Impossible." He turns around and sees the red-haired woman Kalia standing there with her butler, both of them staring at the lightning remnants. The butler's eyes widen, and he mutters that this is origin magic, something only a 7th circle mage can use. Alan stiffens hearing that. He's never even heard that term before, but apparently, that's the level he's reached. Meanwhile, he just thinks their shocked expressions look ridiculous. Seeing them reminds him of his academy days. Back in Caliban, one professor kept praising him non-stop, saying he was talented and begging him not to leave the country. The guy even treated him like a prized student, constantly patting his head with a sword. But Alan always found it annoying, because none of his magic came from that professor. Every spell, every theory, every improvement, he built it all himself. Meanwhile, Kalia, the real ruler of Zenonia County who secretly controls her father like a puppet, didn't come here by coincidence. She had 2 reasons for visiting. First, she wanted to measure Alan's intentions, because even though he holds information that could destroy Zenonia County, he still hasn't used it. The relationship between Zenonia County and Palacio County isn't bad, but Kalia knows something important. The Count is just like her, the same type of person. Someone who doesn't hold power without a reason. That means he wouldn't keep dangerous information unless he planned to use it someday. So her first goal is simple: figure out what Alan is actually thinking. The second reason is to measure the strength of the organization rumored to stand behind him. Of course, just meeting him won't reveal everything, but she brought someone perfect for that job, a wizard named Biankel. This guy once proposed a theory about forgotten era magic and gained fame in the Magic Tower, but later got kicked out for inhumane experiments. Even then, he's still 5th tier, strong enough to wipe out an entire battalion alone. Kalia formed a deal with him, supporting his research in exchange for help. Her plan is simple. Someone skilled in detection magic like him should easily gauge the level of people protecting Count Palatio, and that alone would reveal the scale of the hidden organization behind him. But now, sitting in the reception room, she notices something strange. Biankel hasn't even closed his mouth. His face is pale, and he looks genuinely scared. That's shocking, because this guy is usually arrogant and never speaks politely to anyone. Yet now he looks terrified. Kalia starts wondering if the lightning they saw earlier really was origin magic. She pushes that thought aside and looks at Alan. His expression is the same as always, cold and uninterested. He asks what brought her here. Kalia immediately apologizes for intruding and says she wanted to meet him. But Alan cuts her off and calmly says there's no need to apologize. Then he casually adds that what he used wasn't origin magic. According to him, his magic is barely 2nd tier and practically useless. Kalia obviously doesn't believe that for a second. She glances at Biankel again, and his expression somehow gets worse, but he understands the hidden meaning. Alan is basically warning him to stay quiet, so Biankel forces himself to say he must have been mistaken. That alone shocks Kalia, because this is the first time in years she's heard him speak politely. Alan then moves the conversation forward, asking why she came. Kalia quickly says she was nearby for business and decided to stop by. Alan responds that he's busy and can't talk long. She agrees and prepares to leave. Before she goes, Alan casually suggests she should visit the Duke of Alia instead, saying they'd probably get along. Kalia smiles and politely agrees, but inside she's shaken. After she leaves, Evan asks why someone from the dangerous Zenonia family came here. Alan just shrugs and says he has no idea, and this time he genuinely means it.